Roll call.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Davis? Ms. Gallagher? Mrs. Davis?
Here.
Dr. Yeager? Dr. Dykeman? Dr. Anderson?
Here.
Dr. Gant? Mrs. Hull? And Dr. Maddox.
All right, let's move on down to item number 2, to amend and/or adopt the agenda. Can I get a motion? We cannot vote, however, so what do we?
Right.
We just get started?
Yes.
Okay, well, we don't have a quorum, we're not voting, so let's just go ahead and get started. Item number 3, the FY23 budget presentation.
Afternoon, board members, and Dr. Thomas. This afternoon, we're going to be presenting the 2023 budget. The presentation is very similar to what we've already presented to you. I had made some tweaks based off of finalization of the revenues and how all the pieces of the puzzle kind of fit together. Once we're done with that, we'll flip over to what's needed from our local property tax digest. I don't know if we can turn this down. I'm getting. And then from there, that will be a very short presentation. It's only a few slides, and then we'll entertain any kind of comments from community members, and we've had one gentleman sign up to give comment. For our FY23 budget presentation, first thing I'm going to talk about is the general fund as a whole. Then I'm going to talk about the revenues that go into our general fund. I'm also going to talk about other resources. We've got SPLOST, we've got federal program revenue and expenditures that are operating in our district, and then also CARES and ARPA funds. After that, I'm going to briefly talk about our budgeted expenditures by strategic priority. I have specific ones highlighted that I just wanted to kind of recap and summarize for y'all. And then finally, what are the next steps? You know, we are in May, so we've got 2 more of these meetings left before June 2nd, I'm sorry, when the tentative budget will be on the table to approve, and then it will become the initial budget. The timeline for the fiscal year 2023 is July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. We're going to be speaking primarily about our general fund. It's our Fund 100. It's a governmental fund unit that is going to account for all financial resources of the board, except for those that we have to, by law, keep track of in other funds. And those are debt service, capital projects, federal programs, which are on Fund 400 series, principal accounts, and school food, which is in 600 series. I have in green the capital projects, SPLOST, and federal programs, just because some of those expenditures we're going to be talking about tonight as well. General fund revenues, they're split up into 3 main categories. We've got state, or our quality basic education, our QBE dollars. So we're going to talk about those first. The other bucket is our other or miscellaneous. There's 9 or 10 different sources of other revenues that are in there. Of note, we've got transfers, intangible taxes, TABT, and other miscellaneous revenue. And then finally, the local property taxes. I had pulled this from the LUA operating manual with GDOE, and it's just a recommendation on how to build your budget. You start off with the resources that are needed, so those are your expenditures. We have that in the second part of our presentation. And from there, you back out what you're getting through the state quality basic education formula. And then after that, your other category, you're going to back that out as well. And then whatever is left is going to be what's needed to be covered by your property taxes. First category, QBE. This year we're slated to get $72.4 million of QBE money, and that's based off of a really flat 0.0. I think it was like 7 students more than the previous year. The only reason the revenue is actually growing is because the state is providing some of the resources needed to give all of our staff the $2,000 raises. And so even though our FTE isn't necessarily rising, there are other factors that come into play with that QBE formula, which will result in additional dollars. One thing to note, the orange section, the austerity, nothing is slated for FY23. So all of the austerity that has been given by the state throughout the years, only 2 years that it was really fully funded was 2019 and 2020. For 2023, we are finally back to what's called a fully funded QBE formula. The net budgeted amount for QBE is $72.4 million, and those assumptions are based off of basically a 0% change in FTE, no austerity, a slight increase in our TRS employer contributions, and then also sustaining those $2,000 increase for earned positions. The other category, one thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the federal indirect cost reimbursement. For 22, we had $200,000 budgeted. For 23, we have $3.1 million budgeted. And the reason for the increase, it's just a percentage of your CARES and ARPA dollars that are being spent. So since we have much more federal program dollars being spent, the allowable federal indirect cost rate that we're allowed to charge those programs goes up proportionately. And so for the next 2 years, we will see much more indirect costs, which will help our general fund budget. Overall, this other category, almost $11.5 million, and it's up from $7 million in FY22, the current year that we're in. Our local property tax digest, it has grown by 18.2 to 18.3%. The gross taxable digest, 5.79, almost $5.8 billion. That growth, it's made up of two components. You've got new growth, which is new construction, new personal property, and then you also have reassessment of existing property. So your home is valued more than the previous year. So the reassessment accounts for 15.9% of the growth, while the new growth is 2.4%. The value of 1 mil from 2017 all the way to 2022, it has grown from $3.7 million per mil all the way up to 5.8. And what that's allowed us to do, and what we're proposing is actually rolling back that millage rate from 20 to 18.8. And with the value of 1 mil being $5.8 million, that 1.2 that we are reducing it by equates to about $7 million. So the assumptions for our budgeted property taxes is we have that 1%, actually I need to update those numbers right there. The total growth, 18.2 to 18.3%, but we have to kind of budget in there a delinquency estimate of 1.5%, and then also the tax commissioner holds on and keeps 2.5%. We also have $400,000 that's due back for a tax overpayment refund. And then we also account for roughly $500,000 to $700,000 per year in delinquent payments. Overall, our budgeted property taxes at 18.8 mils is $105.3 million. The way this all stacks up current year to prior year, our overall revenues are increasing almost 6.5%. The property tax is up at the top. Is 11.9%. Like I said, it could have gone all the way up to 18 and change. We're keeping it right at about 11%. The indirect cost, you can see that that's kind of skyrocketed from $450,000 all the way up to $3.1 million. So, I mean, that's almost a 600% increase there. Our other resources that we're going to talk about tonight, SPLOST, CARES 1, CARES 2, and ARP. So just keep in mind that these federal program dollars, they must be kept separate from our general fund, and they're meant to support and not replace the general fund expenditures. They should also be spent on very specific things. We've talked about these in the past. There's 8, and I think now 9 different categories which those ARP and ESSER funds have to be spent. The one thing that we're not doing this year is we're not allocating any money towards continuity of core staff and services, and that is one bucket that we have really utilized the ESSER funds in the past. But with the austerity reduction from the state, and also the other strong revenues that we have, we don't have a need for 23 to lean on ESSER funds to help support general fund like we have in the past. Here is just kind of a depiction of the time that we're looking at. The green box, the FY23 general fund budget, it kind of overlaps between 2020-22 and 2023. On top of that, to support the general fund, we've got CARES 1, and that's going away in September of 2022. We're almost fully, that program is almost fully spent down at this point. We'll have 1 more year to fully expend CARES $2, and then 2 more years after that to fully expend our ARP dollars. Just a reminder, I provided the link in this presentation to our CARES Act or our ARP budget dashboard. Each month it's updated with the balances that we have spent and drawn down.
I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So for our expenditure piece, I'd like to first start off by talking about our guiding principles. There are several things that go into how we shape this budget. Overall, you know, we do have our strategic plan. We've got the 5 different pillars. It's all rooted in that educational equity. I do think maybe a little bit better depiction of this would be more of this circle with academic achievement right in the middle. So if we had all those other pillars kind of surrounding and promoting academic achievement, I think that would be a very applicable visual. So for our strategic plan, not only do we have our general fund helping promote our strategic plan, but we also have our CARES dollars, our SPLOST dollars, our federal program dollars, our ARP dollars, all there leveraging to help support and push forward our strategic plan. We also surveyed the board. We surveyed LSGT folks. We also allowed TAB members to weigh in, students, as well as principals and directors. This survey was opened December 1st and closed on February 7th. The most popular response in terms of how to structure our budget was instruction, furthering reading, you know, prioritizing that students in lower grade levels are reading on grade level. Second behind that is retention of effective teachers. Behind that, we've got mathematics. So just like number 1 up there was prioritizing support to ensure all students are reading on grade level. The third one is mathematics. We also have counselors and social workers at number 4. And then one of the big pushes, you know, what we got from the board all last year is making sure that all of our employees are making at least $12.50 per hour. And as we get further along in the expenditure pieces, we have done that. And that is the biggest thing that has increased the size of this budget year after year is just providing those raises, shifting our entire salary schedule up so that the lowest paid employees are making at least $12.50, and now I think it's starting out closer to $13.41 per hour. So student achievement. I'm just going to highlight some of the things that Brandon had talked about. CCSD, we are continuing to fund and promote smaller class sizes. I've got the chart over there on the right-hand side. There's the state max, and then you also have the CCSD average. Some schools, some classrooms may have have an actual higher ratio than this. Some may have a lower, but district-wide, this is our average. And then kind of to go along with The survey that went out, I did highlight that we have new adoptions. We've got a phonics adoption for grades K through 2, as well as a social studies adoption. And both of those are rather expensive, I think at a few $100,000 a piece. For CARES and ARPA, I did want to highlight number 8, and you guys have already voted on this, to replace student devices grade 5 through 12, and we're using CARES 2 money to do that. 1 through 7 are kind of ongoing, continuing expenditures from the previous year. Community collaboration. With general fund dollars, we're going to continue those community events. I think they were very popular in those family fun day events. And for our charter system, we are continuing to fund those LSGT Better Everyday grants. Roughly $20,000 per LSGT is allocated as part of this budget. For CARES and ARPA, this past year, we had to lean on CARES and ARPA to help increase the ASP hourly rates to attract and retain ASP program staff. That was one of the struggles that we had keeping that program going, was staffing them consistently with the hourly rates that we were paying pre-pandemic. So we did have to increase those hourly rates as well in order for that program to be self-sustaining and sufficient. Climate and culture. I did want to highlight the ratios for social workers, for school psychologists, and school nurses. If you looked in our RESA and other comparable school systems, we do have a very favorable ratio for all of these support services. It may not be to where, where some literature would recommend, but comparatively to other school systems, we do fund them very well. For school nurses, we are continuing to fund 1 nurse per school. We also have 1 telehealth nurse. There's also a district support nurse, which we are continuing to fund with general fund, as well as a lead nurse to help support Amy here at the central office. From CARES and ARPA, we're continuing to fund. We hired this year 2 trauma-informed specialists that are doing some great work. We are also signed the contracts for and are continuing to fund 1 full-time contact tracing nurse here at the central office, as well as a full-time nurse assistant for each one of the high schools, as well as 1 district support lead nurse, which is going to act as a float or a substitute or a support role. We did have some healthy debate on whether or not we were going to keep these positions and keep them funded in CARES and ARP, but we really wanted to make sure that we were prepared in case there was another wave of COVID. Human capital and development. This is where the vast majority of the increases for this year's budget is. And that's why pretty much the whole slide here is highlighted. So we really wanted to attack the retention and compensation. We increased all those hourly rates beyond $12.50. The starting hourly rate now is $13.32 per hour. The TRS employer share increased from 19.81% to 19.98%. It does seem kind of small, but when you look at the amount that costs the district, it is several $100,000. We provided step increases for all eligible employees. And those $2,000 raises that we gave employees in FY22 we're making permanent in the salary structure for FY23. The other thing that business services and HR worked together on was consolidating, reducing, and simplifying the non-teaching salary scale. We went from having over 90 different scales down to about 30. And then in those scales, we ended previously at 20 steps, and we've extended that out to 22. And then finally, after we did all this, we kind of looked and said, okay, what kind of COLA, or what kind of cost of living increase can we afford? What can we give to all staff? So not only are we making those $2,000 raises permanent, but what can we do over and above that? And we landed on a 3% cost of living increase to all salaried all salary schedules. So just a, kind of FY22, the current salary schedule to the FY23, where those landed. You can see that the transportation bus monitor went from starting at $9.91 an hour up to $13.39 an hour. That was a 35% increase. The custodians, they went from starting at $10.65 an hour up to $14.41 per hour, and that's a 35% increase. The other thing to really take a look at is how it affects the entire spectrum of employees that we have here at CCSD, and we really want to look at what does it do for teachers. The starting salary for a teacher in FY22, $40,514. For FY23, we're proposing increasing that up 8% to $43,789. With CARES and ARPA, we're continuing those signing incentives for the high-need positions. I know that we've got mathematics, foreign languages, special ed, just to name a few. We're also continuing those longevity supplements for certified employees that have maxed out beyond the 20 years for certified employees. We're continuing those with CARES and ARP. And then finally, financial and operational effectiveness. For custodial, just highlighting that we fund one custodian for every 22,000 square feet. For safety and security, we did fund kind of like an emergency response unit, a trailer that's going to be fully packed with equipment needed to react to a crisis. Transportation, this year we have money to fund up to 9 to 13 buses. So Gen Fund, we kept a little bit over $100,000 to fund one school bus. SPLOST this year, we have earmarked $1 million. So it's not necessarily the count of buses, it just depends on the size of the bus, whether it's got air conditioning, et cetera. And that can fund between 9 and 13 buses. We also had to allocate additional funds for possible increases in fuel. With the fluctuations that we've had recently, they've gone from $3 upwards of $6 per gallon, and now back down to $4.50 and some change. I get a weekly update from transportation on how much fuel is going for. And so not only did we budget more, but you'll see in a couple slides, we also added some to our contingency just in case it does go up beyond $5.50 per gallon. And then also tracking technology for parents and students. So I know especially at the lower grades, we're looking at funding the badge system where students get on the bus, they bop a system. When they get off, they bop it as well, so there's always kind of like that constant contact of knowing where a student got on, where a student got off. For SPLOST 6, one of the other things that you guys also voted on last month was replacing all staff devices through SPLOST 6. So just an FYI, we did have those bond sale for $75 million. It closed today. So that's been just deposited into our Synovus account, and we were ready to kind of get going on some of those SPLOST 6 expenditures. So we've already approved it, we've put in the requisition, the PO, we've ordered those devices, now we've got the money to pay for it. For business services this year, we fully implemented the ramp. This was kind of a several years in the making. There was some shift, especially in certified positions between schools, but basically it ensures that staff is allocated equitably throughout the district, and it's based off of FTE counts and needs at each school. We're also continuing year number 2 for that disparity study, and then what we have also added this year is the efficiency audit. For Dr. Thomas, we did add a contingency this year. We had room for additional money in case the fuel, shot up. We budgeted for additional kindergarten teachers just in case there was an additional need that couldn't have been projected. I know that if we don't spend this on kindergarten teachers, we already have additional requests for additional certified positions, and especially in SPED already. So this contingency will be something that we will rely on heavily as we get into next fiscal year. And then we also have a set aside for any kind of new superintendent initiatives. And then finally, one of the last things that we added to this budget was a family engagement specialist at all schools, and the tally for that came in just shy of $1 million. So
Are the family engagement specialists school district employees?
like, are they going to be our employees, or are they going to be housed here?
Are they school district or are they other?
We have them budgeted as employees.
As
So, yeah,
employees
salary and
of Clark
benefits,
County? And
yes.
so they'll get benefits and everything?
Mhm.
Okay.
They already are. We just don't have them full-time at all of our schools. So some schools have had them, all schools have someone serving in that capacity.
Mhm.
Some schools have been able to pay for them full-time with their own funding, and other schools have paid for staff that are, do additional duties in addition to their regular job. So this allows every school to have a full-time person in that role.
Okay. I was confusing those with the, what do they call the?
Community school organizers, is that what you're thinking about?
No, well, Family Connections, Community and Schools, do they have family
They,
engagement?
yes, I can't remember what theirs are called, but no, these are people we've had like all the way back, probably over 20 years in the schools.
Okay,
Back when Monica Knight was here and she was over family engagement, and Mr. Greg Davis was in that role. How many years ago, Mr. Davis? It's been, I mean, we've had him forever. Right, so yes, so these are just, we're just making sure that every school has them and they're not having to pull from their local funds. And
okay,
they can direct their funds to instruction. But it is a requirement also of Title I. One of the foundational components of Title I funding is the family engagement, so that's where that part comes from.
okay, excellent, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
A recap of our personnel changes between 22 and 23. For FY '22, we had budgeted a total of 2,107 full-time employees to be paid for out of the general fund. For '23, it actually dropped by 7. So for BOE members, there's no change there. For classified folks, dropped 12 positions, and our certified positions actually went up 5 for a net change of -7. Comparing and contrasting our expenditures by purpose, our operating expenditure budget increased $487,000, while our personnel budget increased almost $11 million. So in this budget, what did we do? We really simplified those salary schedules. We increased hourly rates for all employees beyond $12.50. We took those $2,000 that was awarded to all employees this fiscal year. We're making them permanent next year. We gave a 3% COLA to all employees. You know, we're continuing to focus on low class sizes, and we also included those full-time family engagement specialists at all schools. Summary-wise, starting off the year with an estimated fund balance of $49 million, bringing in $189.1 million for the fiscal year. We plan on spending the exact amount and giving us an ending fund balance of $49 million. So this is a balanced budget. So at this point, that's all that I have with the budget presentation. Unless there's any more questions, and if there aren't, we can always roll into the millage rate discussion.
I'd just like to put a pin in the community schools line item that I saw in the budget. I need more explanation on that one.
One question I've got, Byron, is when we talk about the increase of the minimum hourly rate, and then we also talk about folding in, making permanent the $2,000 that were given last year as a bonus. Does that $2,000 roll into the pay schedule, or is that in addition to the pay schedule that you showed us?
That was rolled into the pay schedule.
Okay.
So we took the existing salary schedules, we combined them. I guess we reduced them, so we took like almost every third one. Then we added $2,000 across the board to come up with our new salary schedules. And then after that, we applied the COLA across the board of 3%.
Okay, so that $13.32 increased minimum hourly rate includes both the $2,000 and the 3% cost of living for this year, for next year.
It is built in there.
It's built in there.
Keep in mind, for that $13.32 minimum, it is more than just that. You know, we are bringing them up on the salary schedule from, I think on the G scale, it was, you know, G1 and, you know, G3 and G7. And what we've done is brought all of those employees up on the scale, which would be almost an equivalent of like a G15. So there was much more movement in terms of hourly rates and overall salary at the lower end of the schedule. So it includes way more on the lower end during that conversion process to get them up above the $12.50 per hour.
Okay, and how would that impact, for classified, their retirement package?
It just depends on which employees that you're speaking. So the vast majority of all employees at CCSD are on TRS.
No, I'm talking about classified.
Yes, so I'm a classified employee and I'm on TRS.
Oh, okay, okay.
There are a few that the state does not permit to be on TRS, and those folks are on PSERS. And the formula for PSERS is not driven based off of your salary. It's just a defined benefit amount that's a set dollar amount.
And what job categories fall under that? Do you know offhand?
Transportation, school food, and if I'm not mistaken, some, that's the primary, the two groups of employees that we have that fall into there. I think there might be some groundskeepers as well.
If the paras are included with TRS?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. I've got another question, but I don't want to. I'll wait. What about the pay scale for the family engagement specialists that we're now budgeting for?
Like, what is their hourly rate, or what is this?
Yeah, what's it based on?
I'm going to lean on Jennifer Frazier up here. She's our So what did we budget, or what salary schedule?
Yeah, what's their salary scale? That was always an issue when I was working with family engagement, was the salary schedule.
I can get that for you. I don't have it off the top of my head. But there are existing family engagement specialists that we have in the district. We just utilize the same pay scale that they're already on. And since we don't have these employees, what we did is just budget a mid-grade. So, you know, if we've got steps 1 through 22, we would have budgeted at a step 11.
Okay, I mean, the reason I'm asking is that we were having social workers, master social workers that were doing family engagement work, and they were making a fraction of what they would have under a different category. So, yeah, if I could find that out.
I'll take note, and I'll get that to you after the meeting.
Thank you.
I mean, I know from some of the panels that I've sat on that they are still severely underpaid for their educational requirement. So what we're asking for minimum educational experience is up here, and then what we're offering to pay them is like down here. So it needs to balance out a little bit more. Perhaps bachelors of social work could be a consideration. So I'm not suggesting that masters of social workers should not take these positions. I'm saying perhaps our minimum educational qualifications should balance more with the salary that we're offering them.
We could have HR, either Dr. Blankenship or someone on her team
I'm
looking.
taking note of that.
I was gonna say, they can look at the job duties, the minimum requirements of the position, and make sure that, you know, what we are paying is kind of commensurate with the duties, the complexity, as well as the educational requirements. And they can kind of compare that to other positions in the district just to make sure that they are fairly compensated.
The 12 classified employees that we're going to be down from FY '22 to '23, could you kind of talk a little bit about that and why that's happened?
Well, I know for transportation, for instance, I'm just going to throw a number out there. I think we budget historically between 150 and 160 school or bus driver positions. We have never been able to fully staff all of those, right? So I think in the previous year, transportation bus drivers, we may have budgeted almost 160, and I think we had dropped it down to almost 150. Currently, we have about 120 employed. So we have several positions open. So what I did, I just rolled that back to make it a little bit more reasonable of a budget. And what I've explained to the transportation department is if they're ever fully staffed and they need to go above that, that's something that we can go into the contingency for.
And
Oh,
what,
go ahead.
one last question about the, at the very beginning, you mentioned attendance, reviewing or revamping the attendance policy, and that's built into the budget. And I guess I'm trying to find the slide so I can have that language. It was an academic achievement, I think. Okay, I'm close. Oh my goodness, I cannot find it. Anyway, somewhere in there it says school attendance policy revamp or review, and it's in the budget. What does that, how is that a budget item?
So for school social work, I'm looking at right there, Part B, in the process of revamping the district-wide attendance protocol. So in this presentation, we basically assigned out different pieces to it. And so this would have been Dr. Watley's portion, but it's a good question. I don't know how that necessarily has a budget implication. I don't think there's any contracted services or any additional expenditures that are involved with revamping the district-wide attendance protocol.
Okay. Because it was also talked about at our last meeting when you all when every cabinet member presented on it, they talked about attendance. And so I'm still curious, like, is there a conversation to be had about how we can impact attendance via the budget? Because attendance apparently is a really big issue.
So I know, and I'm wondering if Dr. Watley put that there as a reason for looking at the additional 1.5 social work positions to support the high schools and addressing the attendance issue.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that was looking at some of the work. I would have to get her to explain that, but I'm assuming that that's what she meant there, because even when I look at, I'm trying to read this, the other area, she has something similar like psychology, the process of hiring 2 additional, and she talks about evaluations for students, and Babies Can't Wait. So it looks like she was putting like what task areas need additional support, and I'm thinking that's what she put for attendance. I'm not sure about additional budget needs. I know they're having a meeting either this week or next week with juvenile court, and they're reconvening that attendance committee, so we will be meeting. Was that today? Because I knew, I'm like, it was either this week or next week, because Ms. Gillis was going on our behalf, so I haven't received a report back from her. So that group was being reconvened, and it would be Department of Family and Children's Services, DJJ, Juvenile Court, Clark County School Districts, and a lot of other community entities, mental health. So to start looking at what we can do in terms of as a community response. And then we are looking and strengthening our attendance protocol, and we've already put in the agenda for the summer leadership retreat with principals to have a block of time to make sure that everyone remembers, at 3 days, this is what we do, at 5 days, this is what we do. So making sure that, and then that information gets back to the schools, and that we have a strong process for responding to those absences. But at this time, I don't know of a budget need, except maybe the staffing to have people at the high schools to really help with some of that.
So my quick question was about the efficiency audit. I don't think I know anything about that, so can you tell me a little something about that? And is it one audit or multiple audits, or?
We have gotten quotes from a few different agencies. Dr. Thomas, do you want to take this? I know the dollar amount that we've kind of set aside for it, but.
Right, what audit did you say?
Efficiency audits, I'm just not.
Okay, is that the organizational audit? Is that the same thing that you, okay. So there was a request at one of our recent meetings, and I'm not sure if you were there or not, Ms. Davis, where we looked at organizational structures and organizational efficiencies. Is there redundancy in positions? Are there places of overlap? We've received a lot of feedback about there being potentially an excess in positions at the district level. So the request from the board was that we have an organizational audit to look at our structures and positions and who's assigned what task, to determine if there are areas where we could cut back and make changes.
That is very rapid. I remember that, so very quickly response. Thank you, I appreciate that.
And I've already shared with Drs. Anderson and Dr. Gant a proposal from one company that can give us an overview of what they're able to provide.
Thank you.
It was done the same week you asked, on Thursday, and I think we had it by Tuesday.
Amazing. We don't want to take away from our public input, so I'm going to stop there.
Lisa, if you could switch presentations over to the millage rate hearing.
Okay, so that concludes our questions from the board, and I'm trying to find my budget. I can't find my agenda. I've got like 14 things open.
There's a paper one right there for you.
Thank you.
I know, you don't want that one, right?
Okay, we will move now to agenda item 4, the millage rate hearing.
Thank you. So this meeting is one of 3 required meetings. There are a state law, there's laws from GDOE, you've got so you have to give a minimum of 2 budget presentations, and you have to give a minimum, if you are increasing taxes, of 3 millage rate hearings. So tonight is the first one of those. The next 2 meetings, May 23rd, we have a budget presentation and a millage rate hearing, and then on June 2nd, before our board meeting that we have at 5 p.m., we're going to have the final millage rate hearing. So last board meeting, the tentative millage rate for FY 2023, it was tentatively set at 18.8 mils. This is a decrease of 20 mils from 2022. Reassessment of properties produced a property tax increase of 10.8% with the millage rate at 18.8. In order to have no increase at all, so the rollback rate, it would have been 17.078 mils, which is a difference of 1.722 mils. And just the nature of assessment and property values, some property owners will see an increase and some will not. It just depends on the valuation of your property. And many of you may have noticed you got the reassessments in the mail. So we did kind of calculate it, and some folks saw anywhere between a 19% increase. I know someone saw a 30% increase. Some saw below a 15% increase. So it's kind of all over the map in terms of what the increases are. But on average, like we said, the increase based off of reassessments was 16 and change. Here's our local property tax digest again, almost $5.8 billion. There it is, 15.9, that's what I was looking for. The reassessment of existing property was, on average in Clark County, 15.9%. We talked about the value of 1 mil increasing from 3.7 to 5.8. The additional 1.2 mils represents about $7 million that we're kind of rolling back and not charging taxpayers. This is a copy of what will be published in the newspaper. It is the digest less exemptions. So you've got your net digest value in 2022 of the $5.7 billion, our millage rate of 18.8. It gives you the total amount levied of $108.9 million. Keep in mind that some of that does go to the tax commissioner. So we did share our overall revenue projection using the 18.8 mils. But overall, looking at prior year to current year, 2021 to 2022, when you're looking at not just the reassessment, but also the new growth, the new income that we're bringing in or that we're taxing is 11.12%. And now is when we have set aside a time for community members to come and provide their 2 cents. Any concerned community members, this is the time that we had kind of set aside just to address you, to let you guys know what they think of the budget, what they think of the overall millage rate. And so we didn't have anyone sign up beforehand, but we did have this gentleman here that had signed up to speak. So we do have a 3-minute timer for you to address the board.
My name is Jeb Bradbury. I am actually chairman of the Board of Tax Assessors, so I'm not here on their behalf. I'm here as a private citizen. I would like to, I saw one slide that in the presentation prior that showed that, you get so much money from the state and you get something from QBE, and then at the end, after you've done your budget, then you see what you've got to have on property taxes, and then you do the math, and that's the millage rate. Unfortunately, that is not the way that the Clark County school system has ever done this. What they do is they call down to the tax assessor's office in January, in February, and March, and want to know what is the digest increasing, and then y'all are budgeting to that number. And therefore, that's why we haven't had a millage rate decrease for the last 5 or 6 years. So I'd like to see you do that. Also, you're carrying over $49 million. I read in one of your budget presentations that that was how many thousands of dollars more than really what you need to be carrying over. So I would ask that you do an additional mill decrease, get us more in line with all the counties around us, and we still wouldn't be there. But he just showed that the millage rate increase would actually roll back. The rollback rate would be like 17.1. If you rolled it back instead of the 18.8, if you rolled it back to 18, you'd still be having a huge tax increase. So all I'm asking is that, y'all find a way somehow to roll this back and help the taxpayers of the Clark County. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And that concludes my portion of tonight's presentation.
Thank you. Okay. We don't have anything to vote on, so unless anyone has any comments before we wrap up, I'll go ahead and adjourn. You can't even vote to adjourn, can we? We're not. I mean, do I make a motion if we're not voting on it? I don't know. Okay.
Adjourn.
I make a motion that we
I just wanted to ask in terms of the general fund the, what do we call it? Our contingency fund. There had been talk at the last meeting, the fund balance, thank you. The fund balance being used to restructure the pay scale to closer to $15 an hour. Has that been thought of or talked about at all?
We have. So what we've looked at with the $49 million fund balance, right? That's what we're projecting at starting out. And if, as a board, we're identifying the 15% threshold that we don't want to go below for the entire fiscal year, we still have some additional fund balance that we could use for one-time purposes, right? So what Dr. Thomas and I, Dr. Blankenship had kind of looked at is if it's still the will of the board that we increase wages more, the way that we would propose doing so is not by increasing the salary tables altogether, because that is a permanent increase. And then the risk of a permanent increase is what happens if the tax digest decreases next year? What if it decreases the year after that? Then we're kind of stuck in a position where we either have to cut staff, or we have to cut salaries, or we have to have furloughs. So really the best option is, if that is the will of the board, go back to a one-time payment either in December, or maybe a two-time payment, once in December, one time in May, for a retention supplement similar to what we did this year. And on average, that could increase the hourly wages over the entire year if we approached it that way.
Which would allow us to address it for now, but when you're already talking about a 30-something% increase, and to be able to project what our economy is going to be like, knowing that things are very unstable in the economy now, we could do a one-time that could support families and employees now, and not have to try to have a crystal ball to say we're going up 40-something% and then put the board in the position of having to maintain that in a more long-term way.
And talking about the fund balance, we do have capacity to decrease that some. So that would be a recommendation to do a one-time payment directly out of fund balance. And if we did I don't even know what we projected at a $2,000 increase, what that cost would be. And it would still be right at or slightly above the 15% benchmark throughout the year.
I think this is going to require a little bit more thought on our part. I know from people that I've talked to. Yeah, because I think all of the things that you're saying are quite doable, but I think it's also doable to do the wage thing as well. And so we really need to just understand what that cost would be. And again, none of us have that crystal ball, but I'm old enough to have retired and lived through situations where we did this before, where, not in the school system, but certainly where wages just were so out of line, and then the hit came and people were willing to take a step back in wages so that they could maintain jobs and things like that. So there are ways to work around that potential contingency, but I wouldn't want us to plan based on a fear of that happening. I think there are ways that we can work through that.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.
At 5:32? Hey, Karen. We need one more.